Welcome to the Right Academy. I am Matthew R. Miller. Today I'd like to talk about a technique called free indirect discourse. Now, I've said before that in order to have a good story, you need several elements, one of which is really good, believable, complex, flawed characters who transform over the course of the story. One thing the reader wants to know is, what is the character thinking, not just what they're doing. There's a number of ways to do this. When we talked about point of view, you could write things in the first person. That's one way to do it. Use I as the subject. I walked into the room. I felt scared because the light was off. I thought about how I used to live in a haunted house and blah, blah, blah. But if you don't want to use I, because it's a little tricky to use the first person, you can do this in the third person using something called free indirect discourse. Now, discourse just means talking. That's really all the word means. Okay. And you have direct and indirect discourse. Direct discourse is quoting exactly what a character said. For example, she said, comma, quotation marks, I sure do love pizza, close quotation marks. You're quoting exactly what she said. Okay. Now, if you wanted to relate that indirectly, you would say, she said that she loved pizza. You're not quoting her exactly. You're telling someone basically the meaning of what she said. Now, free indirect discourse is a method where the narrator, that's the writer, the person telling the story is the narrator, gets into the head of one of the characters in the third person point of view. And you do this, there's a number of ways to do it, but the basic idea is that you describe thoughts the character's having, even feelings, questions the character's asking, but in a third person point of view. That way you're not jumping out of the immersion that your reader is in. You're not switching to the first person necessarily. What you're doing is kind of using the third person to give more detail into a character's inner thought life and feelings. That's the basic idea. That's the gist. Now, here's a definition given by Oregon State University Writing Center, which I like. It says, free indirect discourse describes moments in a third person narrative when the narrator becomes infected by the perspective of one of its characters. Okay. Now, give you some examples. One of the great users of free indirect discourse was Jane Austen. In her great work, Sense and Sensibility, in chapter 16, she describes the character called Marianne. And notice how she describes Marianne's inner person instead of just her actions. Quote, Marianne would have thought herself very inexcusable had she been able to at all sleep the first night after parting from Willoughby. She would have been ashamed to look her family in the face the next morning had she not risen from her bed in more need of repose than when she lay down in it. Close quote. Okay. It's not just saying Marianne left Willoughby, Marianne went to bed, Marianne woke up in the morning. That's describing what happened. It's getting inside of her. So it's saying that how she thought herself, how she felt inexcusable, how she would feel ashamed, how she woke up still tired. Okay. These are things you can't just describe in the third person without having the character say it or using free indirect discourse like this. Another thing you can do is to ask questions. What you're doing here is you're having the character do something, then you just start writing questions as if the character were asking them, but you don't tell the reader that the character is asking them. This way, it's kind of a middle ground between the reader, the narrator, and the character. You see, while you're asking these questions and the reader is thinking probably that's what the character's thinking, but you remain immersed in the story without breaking out of it by saying, he thought so-and-so. So let me give you an example. This is from one of my books that's in progress. Okay, it's about a character named Joseph. Joseph is in a forest and he has to go to the home of the forest demons basically to retrieve something. And he's wondering if this is all real. And he's wondering if he's being deceived, conned by the people taking him to the place. So here's what I say. And was it all not just a dream? Demons, magical villages, spirits? The rational part of his mind told him that there were no demons, that they had been men in costumes, and that the old man and the old woman were somehow involved in an elaborate scheme to milk him out of money. Would they demand a ransom for the medallion? On the other hand, how could one old man and one ancient woman who lived alone in the forest orchestrate all that? Surely there were not enough travelers through these mountains to live on such scams. What I've done is I've written an entire paragraph of mostly questions, not in quotes, not saying that Joseph thought or Joseph said, is asking these questions. So now the reader thinks, is this the narrator or is this Joseph asking these questions? They kind of blend together. And this keeps the reader in the immersion of the story without having to break out of it, by changing perspective or by changing style. So asking questions like that is a good way to use this free indirect discourse. So basically, free indirect discourse is a great way to explore the inner thoughts, feelings of your characters while remaining immersed in the story and without having to blatantly, obviously say so, without having to use dialogue. And you can return back to third person, out of the character's head pretty seamlessly without it being jarring. So that's something you can try and practice. It's one method of really elevating your writing to make it more immersive. And remember, the whole point of writing is for a reader to read it, be drawn into your world, immersed in it, and not feel like they're leaving it until they finish the book. And then you want them to be sad that they left it because they love the book so much, right? Hope that helps. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. I'm Matthew R. Miller. You're watching the Write Right Academy.